Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, where I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Yes, it is Wrestlemania week, lots of hype and anticipation and build for the big show on Sunday. Before I get into Raw and Smackdown though, I do want to address something. A lot of people have been asking me my thoughts on the John Oliver segment that aired on Sunday from last week tonight about WWE and their classification of wrestlers as independent contractors and not employees, and basically all of the issues that stem from that. I will say that I didn't learn anything new from that segment I didn't already know, but it was a very engaging, informative, and very entertaining piece of work by John Oliver and his team. I think what makes the segment so interesting and newsworthy is the fact that it's probably the largest platform in a long time that has actually discussed this issue to a mainstream audience. John Oliver gets millions of views on YouTube from all different walks of life and all different interests. So for him to be talking about this really, I think, will expose a lot of people who are fans and who aren't fans about this. Lots of fans I've seen online saying they never knew this sort of thing about the company, and so I think this is going to educate a lot of people. What I especially enjoyed about the segment was they didn't talk down to wrestlers or wrestling fans or the business at large. Wrestling, I think, is a very easy target for people who aren't fans, who may not truly understand it. So for John Oliver to open up the segment by saying, I'm a fan of wrestling, I like it, and then frequently pepper throughout his commentary, wrestling is awesome, I think that was great. I think, if anything, it was a nice tribute to wrestlers and kind of like a message of love and support for wrestlers and wrestling fans. It wasn't perfect, of course. They used a lot of older footage to try and make their points. In particular, Bret Hart's soundbite from Wrestling with Shadows, like days after the Montreal Screwjob, where he shoots on Vince McMahon and how he treats wrestlers like dirt and everything. He may still feel like that to this day, or he may have felt like that a little bit before the screw job, but it was obviously a very biased kind of point of view from him, and I think in the years that have passed, I believe his attitude on a lot of that stuff has calmed down a little bit. But a lot of what he said, I think, was technically accurate, but it came from a big place of bias, and I don't think it totally blew up or derailed the argument, but it was a very odd choice of soundbite to use. Now, of course, something like this is a very divisive topic. A lot of people have been kind of like circling their wagons around both camps in this situation. A lot of people have been condemning WWE for this. A lot of people have been like kind of defending the company for this and kind of insulting and putting down the wrestlers who are in the company. Well, no one put a gun to their head and told them to sign a contract, which I think is very naive to say, because I think that what people aren't really taking into consideration is WWE and wrestling in general definitely takes advantage and exploits people's their dreams and their fandom of wrestling, and it entices them. Hey, I'm going to work for the biggest company in the world, WWE. That's great, and people will make those sacrifices. I think that it's kind of callous to have that kind of mindset where you don't care for the well-being of the wrestlers, the ones who are putting their bodies on the line to entertain you. That whole argument of people who defend WWE in this makes no sense to me. I think the issue is WWE has the power, the influence, and the capital to start providing health insurance, not just for their employees, like their full-time employees, like their office workers and their agents and producers and stuff like that, and their writers and whatnot, but also the wrestlers. They are the biggest commodity in WWE, and I think it is only fair. It's still a very tricky issue, and I don't really see any resolution happening for this in the near future, possibly in my lifetime. I really don't see any government oversight happening in the future here for a couple of reasons. One, this has been going on for decades. People have known about this, and no one's raised a fuss in the meantime. And also, the current leader of our country is friends with Vince McMahon, so I think he's going to turn a blind eye to that. So yeah, I don't really see anything happening in the future about this, but I think it does help create a jumping off point for further discussion and how the company and wrestling at large can better treat the men and women who dedicate their lives and their bodies and sacrifice so much for entertainment purposes. I have talked about, John Oliver in the segment did talk about things like off seasons and unions and stuff like that in his bit, and I've talked about those topics in older videos of mine, the links of which I will post in the description below so you can get some more of my thoughts about those topics. Okay, now on to Raw. Stephanie McMahon opens up the show and has her big announcement. First, she opens with an April Fool's joke that she's going to be the fourth competitor in the main event at WrestleMania, which, not very funny. And then she goes into the real announcement that it's going to be winner take all. Both women's championships will be on the line in that triple threat match at Mania, which confirms what a lot of people predicted last week when Charlotte won the belt off of Asuka. So I was going to resist this theory. I didn't really want to speculate, but it does seem very obvious now they are going to unify the women's championships, which kind of makes sense because if they're going to have a single women's tag team championships, having a single women's champion does make some sort of sense. And I think that you could argue that, I've been kind of on the fence about unifying those belts because I think right now as it stands with the women's rosters on each show, there's barely enough competition to actually have like a single women's champion on each brand. I think that if they combine the belts, then what we can expect is, what we may expect is a lot of lack of development in other women who aren't actively involved in the championship scene because, I don't really know, I don't trust their ability to make convincing B stories for women who aren't in the title scene, especially if it's being feuded over on one particular show, if that makes any sense. Also, I know that the rumors are the brand split will end when SmackDown moves to Fox, so where do the unifications end? Is it going to just end with the women, or are we going to see unifications of the Intercontinental and US titles, of the WWE and Universal titles, the SmackDown and Raw tag titles? How far do we go down this rabbit hole of unification? That's something we have to wait and see what happens in the months to come. After that, it's Brocky Brock time. Heyman and Lesnar show up. Paul Heyman says that Brock will violate Seth Rollins and desecrate WrestleMania. Very interesting choice of words. Seth Rollins interrupts and says, "Nobody wants you here, you big bully." He takes Brock to Dick Kick City. They fight a little more, and then Seth hits him with another low blow and a stomp, and so he walks off looking triumphant. It's the strongest he has looked in this entire build, and I've said before how hard it is to build this storyline when Lesnar's just not there most of the time. So it's nice to see Seth standing tall for a change against Brock, and so that builds a lot of momentum for him going into WrestleMania. And then backstage, Charlie Caruso interviews him and says, if you hit Brock in the dick at WrestleMania, you'll be disqualified. It's like, he had it coming. So that's an integral part of the storyline here is, will Seth be able to resist the temptation to hit Brock in the dick? It is his weak spot, after all. We've seen countless times that Brock goes down pretty easily when he's hitting the balls, justifiably so, of course. So the trick here has to be Seth cannot actively hit Brock in the dick. He has to basically trick Brock into hitting himself in the dick, kind of like what he did against Daniel Bryan last year. 8-woman tag team match up next as Nia Jax, Tamina, and the Iconics, making their Raw debut, take on Sasha Banks, Bayley, Natalya, and Beth Phoenix, who's having her first match on Raw in about 7 years. Beth is starting out the match. She's ready to go. Sasha does a blind tag to start things off, instantly botches a move. And then by the end of the match, Beth Phoenix kind of steals the hot tag back. She pushes Sasha out of the way, takes the tag. She cleans house. She tackles Tamina through the timekeeper barricade, which by now has to be established as the weakest point of all the barricades. There's always getting knocked down, that timekeeper's area. Beth gets back in the ring, hits Peyton Royce with the Glam Slam to win for her team. So in her first match back in a long time, Beth Phoenix looks very good here. We get a face-off between the ladies here. The build for this matchup, the 4-team match for the women's tag titles, has been surprisingly competent these last few weeks. It's Batista time. The Animal makes his return to his hometown of Washington, D.C. to address his fans. He simply points at the screen. They play a hype package that runs of maybe about 30 seconds, if that, and it just repeats one line over and over again that Batista says, "Triple H has done everything in this business except beat me." And so it plays it over and over again. It shows all the footage of Batista having killed Triple H years ago multiple times. And then Batista, back live, just says, "Hunter, kiss my ass," and he leaves. That was it. It was actually a pretty awesome promo. It was just man a few words, didn't have to say much, had to show the evidence, show the proof, and boom, he's got Triple H's number. So I think that was actually, for what it was a very well done, compact, effective promo that said everything that needed to be said. We get a promo by Elias in front of MetLife Stadium. He says 80,000 people will walk with Elias on Sunday. We then go to a match between Apollo Crews and Jinder Mahal. The ring is surrounded by a whole bunch of jobbers and the Andre the Giant trophy. This whole match is plugged in the Battle Royal for Sunday. Apollo wins in very quick fashion with a frog splash on Jinder. By the way, as this is going on, Corey Graves on commentary really starts hitching his wagon to Michael Che from SNL. So after the match is over, Apollo poses with the trophy trophy. The B team wants to pose with it. Then the Ascension wants to pose with it. And then a big scuffle breaks out. I think it would have been funny if just everyone just gets in a line, taking turns wanting to pose with it. Like literally everyone gets involved wanting to pose before the fight happens. That would have been amazing. So basically we get kind of a mini unofficial battle royal. Apollo Crews stands tall and he poses with the trophy again. It's nice to pretend that maybe somebody besides Braun or the SNL guys are going to win on Sunday. Up next, Kurt Angle's ready to face Rey Mysterio in his farewell match on Raw. Of course, Kurt was Rey's one of his first big rivalries when he came to the company back in 2002. So he's on loan from SmackDown here. Kurt comes out. He says thank you to the fans. They play a big highlight package showing all of Kurt's major career accomplishments, at least in WWE, and very well done. I love this highlight package. It really shows you just what a great athlete, what a great entertainer Kurt Angle was all those years ago. And so why are you going to make Kurt Angle cry before a match, guys? Come on. But before Rey comes out comes big old shithead Baron Corbin to say that, the time for you to go is now. We're bigger, we're younger, we're faster, we're stronger than you, Kurt, and we're better than you. So he's berating Kurt. Rey Mysterio comes out to defend his honor, challenges Baron Corbin to a match, and so that's what we're going to get later on. This really irked me because, we don't get Kurt's big farewell match on Raw. Between this and last week on SmackDown with AJ Styles, these two matches which sound great on paper just don't happen, or they don't find a satisfying conclusion, because last week Orton caused the match to end in DQ, and this one doesn't happen at all. So we don't get that farewell Kurt Angle match at all, and it's kind of a bait and switch. Instead of Kurt versus Mysterio, we get Rey versus Baron Corbin later in the night. Now, I don't know how Kurt versus Mysterio would work in 2019. It's not 2002 anymore, so obviously both their bodies are in a lot different place than they were. So maybe it's a good thing we're not getting that match after all, but I guess we'll never know. Backstage, Charlotte Flair says she's changed the game once again by winning the SmackDown Women's title, and says she will be the winner who takes all. The Revival defend the Raw Tag titles against Blackachet here, and do they add a little drawbridge noise to Aleister Black's little raising platform thing? That's adorable. That's hilarious. I know they added sound effects to Ricochet's entrance not too long ago. This is the first I've heard the drawbridge sound effect, and that's just amazing. Be that as it may, it was a great match with these two teams. Pay-per-view quality stuff. I love the false finishes they had. I love the action by Ricochet near the end. Love Dash's Tornado DDT off the corner barricade. That was great stuff. Match ends in a count out in a really creative kind of way when Dawson grabs onto Ricochet's leg. He's hiding under the ring and he just kind of grabs Uncle Rico's leg as he's trying to get in at the 9 count. So the Revival retain by the skin of their teeth by count out. Aleister and Ricochet get their shit in anyway. They beat, 6:30, Black Mass, the huge, that sort of thing. Great match though, and I hope we get a rematch for these guys down the line. Backstage, Ronda Rousey's getting ready for her match. She says she doesn't feel like talking, which she shows you by doing a lot of talking. Backstage, EC3, Alexa Bliss, and Tyler Breeze are having a chat. EC3 with the world's most natural laugh, talking about Weekend Update. Braun Strowman shows up, that's what they're laughing about. Breezy and EC3Z point the finger at a couple of jobbers down the hall, saying they were showing them some clips of SNL. And so Braun approaches them and says, "You're Michael Che and you're Colin Jost and I'm facing you in the ring tonight." Very interesting foreplay. We get another backstage bit, this time an interview with Roman Reigns, who addresses the rumors that he's not able to wrestle one-on-one just yet, but he says, hey, he's fine, he's great, he's 100%. He's beat down from behind by Drew McIntyre, who says, "You should have said no, Roman." And so he leaves, and Roman gets up under his own power. Nobody seems to be in a hurry to help him, and there you go. That's the end of the build for Roman and Drew. We get one more promo, this time from Becky Lynch. Great promo here, by the way. She addresses what she calls Ronda Rousey's God complex, and she says the only way she can keep the McMahons off her back is by winning both the championships at Wrestlemania. We then go to the much hyped and ballyhooed 6-woman tag team match as Ronda, Becky, and Charlotte take on the Riot Squad. And the whole caveat here is that if any of the Mania main eventers attack each other in the match, then the aggressor is taken out of the main event at Mania. So they're all kind of goading each other into trying to hit each other, and so seeing what happens. That doesn't happen though. A line of the century by Renee Young here is as if we needed another layer to this matchup. Yeah, you said it. So the match goes on. Ronda makes Liv Morgan submit with the armbar in a quarter of a second. As soon as the match is over, she gets up, slugs Charlotte in the face, and we get a big old brawl. And then security comes out. It's the dumpiest looking bunch of security guys ever. They fall over like weebles. And in fact, my favorite guy is this one dude who just holds his mouth going "Stop, please, stop fighting." A bunch of fake cops show up. They look like babies. They look like they got hired from some theater troupe in town. And, one cop can't stop swaying side to side as he's talking. It's very distracting. And these are the least effective, flimsiest cops of all time, because in the ensuing brawl, Ronda takes out a cop. She gets handcuffed. Becky hits Ronda. She gets handcuffed. Charlotte decks Ronda in the face with a forearm. She gets handcuffed. All three ladies are handcuffed. And then they are very slowly, very laboriously taken to the backstage area where they'll be put in cars, presumably, and they'll be locked up. But they're all just kicking each other. Cops are they're getting beat up here, are the cops. I have not seen one taser, one nightstick, one pepper spray can, one gun. These cops aren't doing shit to keep these ladies in line. And they're just like letting them go, basically. It's just so... It's hysterical to see these cops struggle so mightily to keep these women at bay. And they're also the most incompetent cops of all time in terms of what cars they put them in. Because at one point they got Ronda and Becky in one car together. They have a beat where they look at each other, start kicking each other. Ronda kicks a window out. And I love the driver, the cop there. It's like me yelling at my kids in the back seat. God, stop the fighting, stop the fighting. It's like it's as effective as that. And nothing happens. So they finally pull the women out. One cop opens another door. Charlotte's in that one and she pops out. The cop does nothing to stop her. They start fighting some more. Lots of kicks, lots of chicken dancing, jumping around, kicking each other. It's so farcical. How come these cop cars don't have the barricades in them? Also is another question. Ronda commandeers a cop car and rams another one. It's complete insanity. Ronda is sticking her head out the window and Charlotte with a huge knee to her head. And then they all finally get loaded up in the cars and taken away one by one. What in the fuck happened? That was the most awesome, insane, frenetic, and also way unintentionally funny bit I've ever seen in wrestling. That was just so off the page. They went so ham with this one. And you just couldn't look away. I was screaming at my computer watching this as it was happening. When Ronda crashed the car, oh my God, I lost it. This was so insane. And they tried to really show you how intense and hateful this feud between the three women. And it's completely, whatever story they're trying to tell is completely diminished by how Benny Hill, Keystone Cop bullshit you saw with these extras. It was the least effective policing I've ever seen in my life. All I'm going to say is that in our current political climate, when there is a lack of trust in law enforcement and people think that white people are treated differently by the police than people of color, the amount of leniency these three white women get while they're just beating the hell out of each other and the police, it's absolutely spellbinding. And this was insane, and I loved it. I don't know what else to say about it. Bobby Lashley and Lio Rush are in the ring up next. Lio hypes up Bobby, as he's wont to do. Bobby says he doesn't care about the rumors that the Demon is returning at WrestleMania. Sure enough, Finn Balor shows up on the big screen, transforms into the Demon, and goes, bleh, and that's the end. And so there you have it. We're finally going to have Demon Finn Balor performing at WrestleMania. Fans have been wanting this for a long time, and we're finally going to get it here in this IC title match. My only hope, my only prayer is that it's actually dark in the arena when they do the Demon entrance. In your main event, Rey Mysterio has his first match on Raw in 5 years against Baron Corbin. I wish it were against Kurt Angle, but such is life. It's actually a pretty good match. Rey sells his knee loads. Eventually, after he's making his comeback, Baron snuffs him out with a very fun-looking deep six, so Baron wins the day here. Afterward, he's on stage celebrating. Kurt Angle hits him from behind, puts him in the ankle lock, and that's pretty much the end of that. And then the show ends with one final wrap-up from the announcers, just a big wide shot of an empty ring and the fans, and that's where it ends. And that kind of caught me off guard because, a few weeks ago, there was a moment at the end of Raw where Stephanie McMahon had to fill 2.5 minutes of time by herself because the show went short, and she had to just keep talking and stretching. And because at the time I was like, well, God forbid we get a wrap-up from the announcers or something to close the show. Stephanie just has to keep going long. But that's what we get at the end of Raw. Is just kind of oh, one final goodbye. Here's an empty ring. That's that. It blows my mind that this, Rey Mysterio and Baron Corbin, was the closing segment when you had this complete, insane, balls-to-the-wall bit with the ladies getting carted off and arrested, beating up each other, beating up the police, car crashing, window smashing, knee bashing. I'm running out of rhymes. But we have all this stuff happening. And, it's like that's not the way you close the show. Like the second hour was the end as far as I'm concerned. It just seems so weird to me because you could have a show end like the way it did with the ladies beating the fight. You could have the show end like that, end on a cliffhanger note. Instead of spending the next hour speculating, you have them end on that note. Then oh my God, I have to watch SmackDown tomorrow to see what's going to happen. So, but they just kind of let it linger a long time, that third hour. It doesn't seem like that hard of a decision for me. SmackDown begins with the Kevin Owens show, and Kevin's guests tonight are AJ Styles and Randy Orton, two men who he says are fighting for their legacies. AJ spits hot fire in this promo off, saying that Randy's only learned one move his entire time in the company, albeit a deadly one. He also calls out Orton for his prior suspensions due to drug test failures. Orton calls AJ a corporate bitch in the wake of John Cena's absence. Kevin just gets up, doesn't say a word, walks away. I just love the timing of Kevin Owens there. It's great stuff. So we get a scuffle between AJ and Orton. AJ goes for the phenomenal forearm. He eats an RKO as a result. And this is probably the best build we've seen for these two in the entire, 4 or 5 weeks leading up to this thing. I think that's been kind of a consequence of having so many matches for WrestleMania this year, like well over a dozen of this, about 17 or 18 now, as the rumor has been. So with all these matches, not every match gets adequate time for build. And this one I think is going to be a great match, but the build for it has been kind of lackluster up until this final go-home week. 8-man tag match up next as Blackachet and the Usos take on Nakamusev and The Bar. Good match here. The Usos win for their team with a double super kick to Ruru. Not much time to celebrate before Alexa Bliss shows up on SmackDown for the first time in a while. She announces that while the ladies of Raw are out of jail, the Uso Penitentiary is about to fill up because it's been announced that the Usos will defend their SmackDown tag titles against all three of those other teams, Nakamusev, Blackachet, and The Bar. And so, it makes you just wonder, like, why do they reunite the Hardys and bring them back together if they're not going to be part of this tag title match? Seems like a wasted opportunity. The Iconics hit the ring and cut a promo about their women's tag title match, running down all their opponents, including bringing up the fact that they have already beaten Sasha Banks and Bayley. WrestleMania will be iconic. Pose, and then we go to The Miz cutting a promo. He says he's the best version of himself. He plugs his reality show, calls Shane McMahon a son of a bitch. He's going 3-on-1 against Sanity here, and as the match begins, Shane McMahon comes out to witness what's happening. As the match goes on for about a minute, Shane changes the rules and says it's going to be falls count anywhere, much like their match at WrestleMania. So Miz, carrying on what he did the previous week, single-handedly murders Sanity here. He takes out each man individually, finally crushing Eric Young's head on a box on the outside. Pins to win. Shane McMahon is sitting in an SUV looking on with a smug look on his face and drives off. And then as that SUV drives off, a cop car rolls in and Becky Lynch pops out. In the span of about 1 hour on SmackDown, we get our third recap of the big lady brawl from Raw. Corey Graves is in the ring introducing Becky Lynch for a promo. She just walks over to the announce table and stands on top of there and delivers a very solid promo saying the revolution that she began at SummerSlam when she, turned heel will finally come to fruition at WrestleMania when she becomes a double champion. Another strong promo by Becky, 2 in a row for her on the week. We then get an 18-person mixed tag team match. What the hell is happening here? It's basically a way to promote not just the Andre Battle Royal, but also the Women's Battle Royal at Mania, which up until a couple days ago, I had no idea was going to be happening. Lacey Evans, hellos and goodbyes, and then the match just ends in a big schmoz, and then much like the Apollo Crews Jinder thing on Monday, just turns into another kind of informal Battle Royal. People are just throwing each other out of the ring and stuff. We get some intergender stuff as well, like Nikki Cross jumps on Shelton Benjamin's back, Asuka kicks EC3's head, and then she actually eliminates Matt Hardy last to stand tall. Probably the most just solid intergender action we've seen in that last minute of action in a long time in the company. Of course, it was the men fight the men and the women fight the women until the match fell apart, and it was mostly pretty much women and men fighting separately up until that end where they did a little bit of intermingling as well. Very creative way to try and promote these two battle royals at once. Don't know if it's the most effective thing in the world, but what are you going to do? Our final match tonight is Samoa Joe in a non-title contest against Ali. Just Ali. And just Ali just gets beaten up pretty quickly by Samoa Joe. Coquina clutch. Ali goes down. And boy, it's crazy how far like Ali's stock has fallen in the last, month or so after getting injured before Elimination Chamber. Kofi takes his spot. Like, you wonder, it's like if this was Mustafa Ali's moment, like for Mania, until Kofi Kingston just swoops in and captures the hearts and minds of people. Speaking of Kofi Kingston, it's time for the big contract signing, finally making official what people have been expecting for weeks now between Kofi and Daniel Bryan for the championship. Daniel signs the contract first. He tries to educate the fans, but the fans just constantly chanting for Kofi in some form or fashion. Daniel brings up the fact that Kofi is, what Kofi's going through right now is eerily similar to what Daniel Bryan went through 5 years earlier with the whole yes movement and all that stuff, but how it's very fleeting, it's a fad, so don't get complacent, don't be a bystander in your own life. And then finally, Kofi stands up and he talks back to Daniel, and a very passionate promo here where he says, I have not been sitting on the sidelines, I've been watching, I've been waiting, I will beat you at WrestleMania, I'll become the champion, emphatically signs the contract, big stare down, and that's how it ends. Kofi has not had very many chances to speak for himself in this build. The only other time before that was with Vince McMahon a few weeks ago, but when he does speak for himself, it generally delivers. Great stuff by both men, actually, in this closing segment. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, Raw or SmackDown. This week, for the final edition of Who Wore It Better before the count resets after WrestleMania, I'm going to go with Raw. I think it was just the more interesting show, simply on the merit of the big old lady brawl in the second hour. Nothing SmackDown did could have possibly topped what happened between Becky, Ronda, Charlotte, and all those shitty-ass cops. It was just like the most insane thing I'd seen in a long time. It had wild spots, had lots of fighting, had some unintentional hilarity thrown in. It was just so memorable and just so, you can't look away from this. I wish more of the wrestling were like this, to be perfectly honest. It was great. It was a great visual, great television for good and bad reasons. I also enjoyed the Seth and Brock confrontation to open the show. I liked Batista's little promo. It was short, effective, to the point. It was just such a good heel thing to do. The tag title match with the Revival and Aleister Black and Ricochet was awesome stuff. And so, yeah, the only thing I didn't like about Raw was just the fact that the main event of Corbin and Mysterio was like a bait and switch from the Angle Mysterio match we were supposed to get. Why would you bother bringing Mysterio over from SmackDown for this matchup and not get the match you actually advertised? And also, the only other thing I had that really stuck in my craw was the placement of the Lady Brawl. The fact that it didn't close the show, I thought was a real big missed opportunity. With SmackDown, I think it was also a very strong show. I enjoyed the opening bit with AJ and Orton in the Kevin Owens show. The contract signing was also a strong way to end it. I think, the 18-person mixed tag schmoz thing was an interesting way to build the Battle Royals, but that wasn't something that really put it over the top for me to put it in the pros. I think for the 2 weeks in a row now, Miz killing sanity all by himself. Why even have them there? It just seems like kind of a waste of their time and their talents. And Joe versus Ali, I was kind of hoping for kind of a better match. It just ended in a super big squash. It didn't really hold my interest and didn't do any favors didn't help Ali, and it didn't really help Joe that much either. Joe and Rey have had almost zero interaction. Of all the matches at Mania, this one is the one I'm the least interested in because, one, we're kind of deprived of a Rey Andrade finish at WrestleMania, and two, these guys have not interacted in the slightest in weeks, and so this match just kind of has no heat to me, basically. But yeah, I think both shows did a good job, that final push to WrestleMania, but to me, Raw was just a bit more interesting. So there you go, the final tally for Who Wore It Better this year is SmackDown winning 31-20. Good job, Blue Team, you did it once again. Of course, I'm going to be in New York for WrestleMania weekend. I'm going to be there from Thursday until Monday morning, so you'll see me at WrestleCon Friday and Saturday. You'll see me at Black Label Pros Adventures in Wrestling Friday afternoon, and of course, you'll see me at WrestleMania as well. Come on by and say hi, and I'm still working on the details of a possible meet and greet somewhere in Manhattan during that weekend, so keep your eyes peeled on Twitter and Facebook for more information on that. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time. Enjoy WrestleMania.